My birthday was in January, and I turned 62. So in January, I will be 63. That is amazing to me. I am well beyond where I ever thought I would be in music, working in rock and roll, being on stage, doing the kind of music and the performances I do. I'm way outside of my box right now of expectations. And that might be reflecting in some of the choices I made for creating this album.
Yes.
With Hole in My Heart, that's also a very reflective one, which takes into account a breadth of experience.
Yes.
And again, I don't know if I could have written that kind of lyric when I was younger.
Yeah, the emotional agility seems relevant there. So here, there's an awareness of the risk of kind of just being with just ourselves and getting caught up in the original story that we tell about who we are and what our experience is. And particularly, pain determines our cost, and beware your sadness, it's not a kindness. So those two lyrics jump out at me. Of like, okay, I could be caught up in my story, and alternatively, back to the idea of possibilities, like, and the whole equivalent of the Apollo mission here. There's a possibility of me not, as opposed to ignoring these discomforting emotions, like being aware of them, honoring them, and not necessarily being determined by them. That, I think, is something that this song is grappling with, that the emotional agility there.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
So it's interesting, the combination of this kind of more familiar All the Pretty Horses sound.
Yeah.
But with this kind of sophistication in the lyrical content of what it's suggesting about the relationship one has with one's own story. Could you reflect on that?
Yeah, definitely. So that one I wrote, and I did go back to some of my familiar techniques of creating a guitar melody and a rhythm, and then the storyline and vocal melody. So it does fall into some of my more familiar patterns of how to create music. So I'm thinking like Come On Death is similar to this style of song construction and sound.
Yes, that's absolutely, yes.
Yeah, and it's mournful, it's moving, it's not a rocker, but it's got intensity. And then the lyric, the lyric is coming from the sense of reflecting on the present day craziness that we went through and are going through. Interestingly, this song, I should say, is a song that I started years ago. I wrote this song I began writing it, let me think now, maybe 2013.
Around about when we met.
Yeah, and it was still in the sketch stage. I only had a couple of verses done. It wasn't really resolved, and I remember I tried it out for an acoustic songwriter focus thing that used to be, it took place in the Hook and Ladder theater space, which used to be Patrick's. And one of the members of the now Hook and Ladder was beginning to play with the idea of having a singer-songwriter night.
Yes.
And I was invited to be one of the guests on that night. And And I did that song, and I was like, I'm just working out, I don't know, I'm just gonna try it out, and I kind of stumbled through it. And then, as things go in my life, because my head is pretty chaotic, I also have ADHD, which makes everything on the level of equal importance all the time. So it's kind of like everything always, all the time, going on in my head. It's really difficult for me to calm down and to level things out and to piece things together, which can explain a lot. And I only got the diagnosis probably about 3 years ago, 4 years ago. Yeah, probably 4 years ago. So it's kind of a new thing. I just thought I was like that, but now I have a name for it. So there, where was it? Oh yeah. So I completely forgot the song. Completely forgot it. I didn't write down any notes. I didn't write down the lyrics, more than a couple of sketches on some paper somewhere, which doesn't exist anywhere now.
There wasn't a recording?
And there was no, I didn't record it. I didn't do any songwriting songs. I was just keeping it all in my head. And it was just boom, gone. And every now and then I would try to remember what that song was, and then I could never get anywhere with it. Years went by. I couldn't figure it out. Years went by. And then I was like, wait a minute. And this was just recently, this was probably just a couple of years ago. I thought, wait a minute, that's right, I did record it at this place. And they did recordings there, I think. So I reached out to the person who was not Hook and Ladder and said, is there any possibility by chance that you recorded that thing? And sure enough, they did, and they had to dig for it because it was all old technology. And they found it, and they sent me a digital recording, which I again promptly lost. So, because now everything is on digital, and I'm like, oh, I got the recording. And so I'm going through all of my hard drives and all of my backup systems and blah, 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 and trying all these different names that might bring it up. Finally, I found it, and I took it out, and this is when I was trying to figure out new songs and creating new songs. I thought, I want to finish that song. And I pulled it out, and it was like, oh, thank God, there it is. So then when I had it, then I did the diligent work that all songwriters should. I formally recorded what I had in the sketch version, wrote the lyrics out, you know, and also digitally. And then I had my template, and I started to fight with trying to do the resolves, the bridges, the whole concept, find the meaning in the lyric that I had began working with way back then.
What was the original lyric?
I think there was a hole. I think it was a hole in my flesh and the hole in my heart. Those two lyrics were original from way back then. So the rest of it, the bridge, the kindness, the sadness is not a kind. That's all new. So, and the final one about the path, that's new. So yeah, I basically found what I want, kind of understood kind of what I was trying to say. And then from the perspective of now, a decade later from writing that, I suddenly had it. I knew what I was trying to say. So then I put it all together and finished the lyric and put it together.
And that final lyric, I think, weaves together the various stories in Jackie Ray. This fate is all we have to share. So the focus at the end of Jackie Ray on the commonality, always, the fact that everyone is changing the best that they can. The sense of being all in it together. This fate is all we have to share. Just this. There's a hole in my path, and I stumble all the time, like Terry. Missing the mark. I'll fix it, like Jackie Ray, from an old mound of dirt and careless design. So there is still this hope that, as difficult as it seems, as much as this chaos is killing me and the hat's being blown off my hat, like there's something endearingly resilient about us humans,
Oh,
and
yeah,
you feel
yeah.
into that. And so yes, I'm like Terry, and Terry is with me still, and I'm with Terry, and there's this faith. There's going to be this transformation of an old mound of dirt into carelessness, and kind of like how I think the darkness kind of emerges
Yeah, yeah.
out of the fragments.
Yeah, it does. Oh, and the lyric on Hole in My Heart, take this piece of hate, that's all new too. And that was reflecting on the end of the Trump era and all of that chaos that unfolded, the backlash, the conservative permission to be angry and fearful and disrespectful.
Yeah, disrespectful. There isn't this. Obviously, there isn't the sense of the dignity of everyone and everything, and when the permission is given to just act on one's fear and hate.
And the president of America gave that permission.
Right.
That lyric is directly reflecting on that situation. So yeah.
And then again, at the other end of the spectrum to that, the final lyric on the record in Green Eyes, majesty, like relates to the respect and dignity we've been talking about. All this majesty, our difference, makes me think again of the difference between you and the character addressed in Jackie Ray. The journeys are not parallel at that moment. So there's this celebration of diversity and difference, and the growth that is happening even as I can't see it without taking on the massive challenge of empathy. All this majesty, our difference will provide. Break all this mystery, our beauty lives inside. Our beauty lives inside. That is the final lyric.
Yeah.
The drive to... a favorite philosopher of mine is Spinoza, and he has the idea that everything that's living has this conatus, this drive to survive and or flourish.
Oh, sure.
Everything has this drive.
I think so.
And yeah, I think so too. And Spinoza's not to get too philosophical on a tangent, but it seems relevant here. The record is recognizing that there is this yearning. Everything is changing, and there is this yearning, and it can, in heroin, this desire can, we can turn to, say, heroin, or we could become addicted to various different things. But underneath that, there is always this dignified kind of conatus, Spinoza calls it, this desire to survive and or flourish. And like feeling into that at the end, that seems a perfect thing to just home in on at the end. Let's talk about the ukulele and the instrumentation and the way in which, like, this is the other bookend, the more experimental song. You were saying this is you, produced by you, as opposed to Barb,
right.
The first and the last track. The ukulele, obviously that instrument has a different character to the electric guitar or that kind of punky piano.
Mm-hmm.
And there is more of a kind of like coming home than one might expect at the end of this album.
Yeah.
Could you expand on that and on how the ukulele plays into that and how this song came to be?
Yeah. Well, as things unfold, sometimes it seems like chaos, and then you find the order in it. And that song presented itself accidentally. During lockdown, I was doing a lot of living room streaming performances, which a lot of artists were doing.
From England, I like
and I would try to do something different because I was doing so many of them at the time, and I was like, oh, I just keep doing the same things. I got to do something different. I got to change, change what I'm wearing. The cats are in different places in the living room, whatever. And I'm learning how to do it as it progresses. If you watch them in order, you see that very terrible stuff at the beginning. I get better at it towards the end. But yeah, I was still fighting to come up with something new. I had bought a ukulele for Lynette, my spouse, Lynette Rainey Grandel, for Christmas a number of years ago, and she tried to learn it and worked on it and was pretty consistent for a while, and then life took over and she kind of set it aside and didn't do anything with it. So I pulled it out during the boredom of lockdown, and we're all walking around, in bare feet, which is great, all year long. And I would grab the ukulele and I would start just playing with it. I didn't know how to play it. Just playing with it and make up little songs and follow her around and sing about whatever she was doing at the time and just irritating her to pieces.
Sweet.
Yeah, well, she didn't think so. But it makes a good story. Anyway, it was entertaining me until she would get mad. And so I was doing that. And then I was just curious about it. It's like, why? How does this work? I don't even know how to tune it. So I figured out how to tune it and started understanding the instrument as working with drone strings. And then the lowest string on a guitar is usually the lowest sounding, but this one is highest sounding string. Like, well, that's bizarre. And so I started realizing that was also a drone string. So then the chords and everything are kind of created through just like either one finger or two fingers and different placements on there, and then letting the drones be themselves. I mean, you can change it a little bit, but it's all kind of based on that idea as far as I can tell. Now, I don't read music, I don't write music, and I'm just now beginning to get inklings of what music theory is all about. So I'm way curious about that, but I don't have the tools that other people have. I don't have the understanding of the written language of music, for example. So I don't, and I play often with drop D in my tuning. So traditional chords don't work, and I'm too lazy to try to teach myself, so I just make my chords up. I just kind of play until it sounds right, and then I memorize where my fingers are, and that's how I make my chords. I don't even know what chords they are. I don't know anything. Really, I don't know anything.
I'm on that parallel journey with you.
Yeah.
That's my method too.
So it wasn't hard for me to begin to use that technique to make up chords on the ukulele.
Yeah.
And I started crafting this little melody that I really liked. And then I was itchy to get a new song. And we wanted to resolve this album. And I wanted it a little bit more than an EP. I wanted to get to the maximum size that I could on a vinyl, but I knew I wanted a vinyl. So I knew I had a little bit more space to get another song in there. So I started playing with the lyrics, and it just became a very personal, reflective thing based on me following Lynette around and talking about her. I took that idea and started talking about us. And so I wrote the lyric reflecting on our journey. Both of us are writing memoir.
Yes.
Lynette's, because she's the English professor and knows writing, has already finished hers. Hers has been accepted with the Minnesota Historical Society Press. They're going through the editing process now. After it's an involved process when you're doing an official publication, not a self-publication. This is like the publisher's reputation is on the line of the songs or the books they take on, so their vested interest is to make sure that book is going to work, which is working for you as a writer, of course. But that means you have to do a lot more writing than you expected. she's in the process now of finishing that final editing, and it's due to be released in February. My memoir is still in the enjoyable writing stage where I can do whatever I want to do. Nobody's telling me what to do, and I'm about halfway done with my first manuscript draft, and so it's all up to me. I'm hoping to get it finished by the end of this year. But because of that, we've both been reflecting on our life journey together, and the struggles that we revisit still. We still revisit because that's what humans do. But we have accomplished and we've gotten a lot of things into place and on track pretty well. Well enough that we feel pretty good about everything. We get scared now and then still, but it feels good.
We loved each other. The fact that the recurring lyric here, whereas in Jackie Ray it's the emphasis on everyone, I've changed the best I can. Here, the point of home the anchor that we keep on returning to is we loved each other.
Yeah, and that's what saw us through our relationship and all the turmoil and the very typical rock and roll relationship we've had. It was that love that pulled us through everything, and so that is the theme or the thing I return to in that. But then I try, and I have to write it in lyric form, so I have to kind of take shortcuts. I do cover a lot. I cover like our whole relationship, all 3 decades, 3+ decades of it.
In a short song.
Yeah, in a lyric, which was just hitting the highlights. But I do reflect on all of it. The beginning, where we're just kids and we're just living with other people and trying to make a life, and then we move into our careers and our professional stuff. But we're still hanging in there. But then things get really chaotic for me because I am beginning to work with my untangling being trans in a world where that was not something people did. I came out in 1988. It was a very different world back then, and not a friendly place for trans people. So we had a lot that we were going to take on by trying to stay together as I untangled it, because there was no support. And I became suicidal beforehand, and that continued on for a long time, in that I would revisit that option, and I would play with that option. I never did attempt it, but I got to the place of despair plenty of times when that felt like a very realistic option. And that was very frightening for both of us. But again, it was a world where we didn't know how to deal with that. Society didn't really know how to deal with that. We do now. We do know what to do if somebody is exhibiting those kind of things.
Yes.
We get them to help. We get them to talk to some. Back then, we didn't know that. We just tried to deal with it ourselves, or we tried, tough love or whatever we did back then to try to help people get through it, or not. You tend to center around yourself and protect yourself, and if you're going to be that way, be that way. I don't care. That was the world that we lived in back then. So anyway, I'm going off on a tangent, but
no, it's right. That's all in the song.
But I bring that there where I felt like I didn't want to live, and it did pull us apart. That chaotic time pulled us apart, and we did separate twice, because it wasn't the trans stuff. It was everything else. It was my despair. It was my trying to find a path in a world with the challenges that being trans in an industry at the time didn't accept. The music industry at that time did not recognize trans. They were afraid of it. It seems bizarre now to think about that, but that's the way it was back then. That whole tumult of my life just became too difficult, and we pulled apart. But as things turned out, it was that love that survived all of that.
Yes.
And when we finally got to a place where it felt like even this isn't going to work, the separation isn't going to work, that was the thing that began to pull us back together and caused us to try again.
There are other songs in the back catalogue that deal with that aspect of the relationship.
Yes.
Yeah.
Lots. White Horses.
Yes, exactly.
Being one of the main ones.
One of the main ones. And so it's just so intriguing that all of that is in much more succinct form, told differently, but that same material is here in this song, which has that sweet ukulele.
Yeah, you don't expect it in the song.
It's reframed.
And the melody and the lyric is very light and very, very celebratory. But then the lyric is still takes a dark turn.
Yeah.
And it brings that gravity back in. And when I was trying to decide how to put these songs together on the album, that one always felt like it should be the last song. It always felt like that should be the one to close the album.
Yeah. It begins way back in the old days, so I remember. So there is this, it's got this clear commitment to looking back clear-sightedly at what, not just at what is, but at what has been, and the journey so far. And yeah, I think it's there's a lot of darkness in it as we clear-sightedly observe the journey. And I think it's so appropriate that we have this song that then leads to the majesty. What is the relationship between recognizing this majesty? We were talking as well about dignity and respect throughout, and thinking the darkness. Like, what's the relationship between those two?
It becomes a celebration of our messiness.
Yeah.
As humans.
Yeah.
That is our downfall, but it's also our strength.
Yeah, we are all Terry to some extent, and we're all Terrys that are becoming Jackies.
Yeah. It's where creativity comes from.
Yeah.
Creativity is a form of problem solving.
Yeah.
And humans are problem solvers.
Yeah.
That's how we got to travel into space.
Yeah.
That is the problem solving drive of humans.
Mm-hmm.
And my ADHD, how I dealt with that, not even knowing I had it. That was all problem solving. It was life problem solving, which I still do. And I still work. Now I just know what it is.
Yes.
And that can be our strength and our power and what makes us survive and what gives us that drive, like you say, to flourish and to move forward.
Yes.
It can also be our destruction. It can be what spins us out of control, which tempts us into other ways of coping, which will spiral us down to early exit from this life.
Yeah, different forms of addiction and destruction.
All of that, my suicidal tendencies and despair that I went through when I felt like I couldn't problem solve.
Yes.
And that was that was one solution. You know, it was a possible solution. And in the depths of despair, it makes sense. So that majesty is all of this. It is all of us.